So hello and welcome to this session, Women in Radio. I would like to start with this picture. Let me show you the picture. Now, that was the first voice that Spanish people listened on the radio, the first. It was a woman. It was a female voice. But what has it happened since then? Well, so what happened was that in Western countries, 70% of the voices that you listen on the radio are male, in the belief that male voices are more convincing. Obviously, this is not true. And as we heard yesterday, it's like a myth. So it's just a vocal stereotype. We conducted a research concluding that the predominance of male voices in radio cannot be justified in terms of effectiveness, in terms of the capacity to attract attention, in terms of recall. So it's just a gender vocal stereotype. And this is just the most visible part of the problem, but we have more aspects to solve. And this is why we are here today. We need to explore ideas to improve the influence of women in the radio industry. We have to break this glass ceiling. And to do so, we have an expert panel today here. Ulrich for Austrian Broadcasting Corporation, Sila Benko, Swedish Radio, and Nikki Birch, Rosina Sound. They're going to make a short speech, and then we'll have time for the debate or for your questions, okay? So let's get started. Well, we are missing Christiana. Unfortunately, Christiana cannot be with us today. But let's get started with Ulrich Westenhagen. Ulrich is the head of personal and international relations for all ORF radios. She's the co-founder of the ORF Women Task Force and the vice chair of the Equal Opportunity Commission. Ulrich is going to tell us the story of 8 women who decided not to wait for somebody to do something for them. So please welcome Ulrich Westenhagen.
Yeah, no problem. Yes, Christiana is quite sorry that she can't be here, but she, as a member of a staff council, has negotiations today, so she's sending her regards, and I hope I can take her part. I would like to tell you a story about women's careers a decade ago in Central Europe and in Austria as well. The ceiling was not made of glass, it was made of pure concrete. And the situation in the Austrian Broadcasting Corporation wasn't any different either. We had about 15 to 18% women in leading positions, depending on how you define leading positions. And we had one lonely woman on the board of directors and no perspective of things ever getting better. Nowadays, the Austrian Broadcasting Corporation is a role model, a best practice model in Central Europe. Our German colleagues from the public broadcasters often tell us how they envy us for the programs, and our Director General was awarded an award for gender equality promotion by the United Nations. So how did this happen? Well, 11 years ago, 8 women decided not to wait for somebody to do something for them, not to wait for legal conditions to change, and not to wait for men to step down from power out of their own free will. These 8 women didn't have very much in common. They were just staff members of the ORF, but they came from very different parts of the company and had different professions. They were journalists, they were head of department, directors, staff council members, technical and sales staff, so quite a different kind of thing. But they joined forces, they founded the task force, and in due course a women's platform, which by now has 650 female members. The goal was to strengthen women in ORF and to ensure that they were included in decision-making so as to realize the vision of a strong company fit for the future. So the question is, did we succeed? Well, we think to some extent, yes. One of our most important goals was to lobby a quota, a women's quota, into our legal basis. And now, by law, ORF has to fulfill a quota of 45% women on all levels of hierarchy. We aren't there yet, but at the pace women were promoted when we started, we would have needed 41 years to reach the goal, 4-1. Nowadays, we have approximately 32% women in leading positions, and we hope to make the quota in a few years' time, at least not by 2050 or something like that. I know a lot of people don't like the idea of being a quota woman, but we decided for us that it was the only way to get things going, to create pressure then, and it still is necessary because we still need pressure to get capable women into positions they are qualified for. This is not self-understanding, at least not in this country. And maybe we can renounce the quota in a few years' time when we have reached the goal. Maybe we can reach 50% and not only 45, but let's have a look. What was interesting too was that the younger women in our company said they needed guidance and assistance by more experienced women. So we created, the first thing we did was to create a mentoring program for women by women. It is still administered by the task force, and it's now in its 11th year. We have about 20 tandems, mentor and a mentee each year. And around 200 younger women have absolved the program until now, and some of them have made quite a career. You see a few of them over here. What I'm quite proud of is that we have 40 female executives who are part of this program. They invest a lot of time, a lot of private time, a lot of enthusiasm, and they try to guide their younger colleagues, which I think is a good thing. The next step was to demand obligatory hearings whenever there was a leading position to be occupied in our company, so as to let the women present their skills and their knowledges. Even if you wondered, this was not state-of-the-art 10 years ago in the ORF. It wasn't quite clear how positions were taken. Usually they were taken by men. But now it is state-of-the-art, and it heightens the possibility of women to be perceived. We have also demanded a curriculum to promote women's careers, which is now in its 5th year. It gives them the skills they need for leading positions in advance. Another thing we thought was quite bad was the gender pay gap in our company. So we asked our Director General to install a group, which Christiane and I are part of, which should define the possibilities to install gender budgeting into our company. We started in 2012, and by now, the gender pay gap is evaluated every half year, and the gender budgeting has found its way into our financial plan. At the moment, we have approximately 14% gender pay gap in ORF, which is for Austrian conditions superb, because Austria has about 21% gender pay gap in average, which makes it the 3rd worst position in the whole of Europe. Nothing to be proud about here. What we also have is we found out that networking was lacking in some parts of the company. The women had difficulties getting into contact to each other, etc. So we institutionalized a monthly get-together. We do it in a restaurant, and every woman in ORF is free to come and to talk to each other, to exchange ideas and issues and assist each other, because it's much easier if you had a glass of wine last night to talk to each other the next day. This regular table has become quite an institution by now, and whenever we invite high-level guests like our Director General or the chairman of the board or other directors, they come willingly and answer questions to the female staff poses. And I think that's a very important thing. Thus, every woman in the company, independent of her position, gets the chance to talk personally to a high-level executive. This is not easily accomplished in the rest of Austria, at least. I don't know Might be out different in Scandinavia, but not with us. And last but not least, we also think it's quite important to have some fun sometimes, because gender equality is a hard struggle. So we organize a big women's party every 2 years or so, depending on financing, and have a lot of fun there. And in the meantime, the men are asking if they can come too, and they're cordially invited if they want to. But what would happen if the task force ceased to exist, which I hope won't happen, or if it isn't as strong any longer? We've thought about that. We have institutionalized gender equality into the structures of ORF, and we have a lot of controlling processes. For example, there is a Gender Equality Commission consisting of members of the management and of the staff council, and together with the equal opportunity officers, we have created an equal opportunities plan, which is evaluated every second year and was award-winning as best practice model by the European Institute for Gender Equality, so it's quite substantial, we think. So there are now institutional bodies in the structure of the ORF who can take care of gender equality, and if they can't solve the problem, well, there is still the task force. This very long road to more gender equality, which we've been fighting for with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of naivety sometimes, a lot of trouble along the road, but always in high spirits, has led to a change in the attitude of women and men in our company. It has led to an understanding how important gender equality is for a society and for a company, and our women have become more self-confident. They know what their rights are, and especially they know where to go if their rights are violated, and we think that's quite important. But we as a task force were lucky too, because we did a lot of work next to our regular jobs, but we also have a Director General who let us press the issue without any restrictions. He made us his advisory organ in all questions of equal opportunity, and he also assisted us whenever we demanded changes in the matter. We're very proud that our work has become noticed outside ORF at the moment, because in November 2017, we were awarded the Media Line in Austria for the persistent promotion of women in journalism, and we think we're quite proud that we were invited to present the initiative here at the European Radio Days as well. So what is the conclusion? The conclusion is quite simple. Don't wait for somebody to help you. Take initiative, join forces, and just press your issues forward. We can do it if we want to. Thanks.
Fortify, Quota, mentoring program, and a chain of aptitude, very good strategies. So our next guest is Sila Benko. She's been the general director and CEO of the Swedish Radio since 2012. She's been working here for more than 30 years. And last year, she got the award Manager of the Year in Sweden, so congratulations. And she's also been awarded a prize for her work with diversity and gender balance. At the Swedish radio today, 50% of all managers are female. So please welcome to Sila Benko.
You have to put on the... Well, good morning, everybody. Well, the title of this session is Breaking the Glass Ceiling. I'm going to tell you my story. I think I broke it. And to be able to break it, you need some support. When I started at the Swedish Radio, I started as a trainee at the sports department. And this was in the mid-80s. I very early on realized that if I was going to survive my trainee position, I needed to work somewhere during the summer in the sports department. So I applied to all the sports departments that there were in the entire country. I was called on one single interview. I was interviewed by a guy. He was head of sports at one of the daily newspapers. I thought he was terribly old. He was most likely in his 40s. He asked me 4 questions. And the first question was, have you ever written an article? And I said, no. The second question was, have you ever edited a newspaper page? And I said, no. The third question was, well, have you ever been in an editorial room at all? And I said, no, I'm studying, I haven't. And then he looked at me quite blankly and asked the fourth question, well, do you know anything about computers then? Because this was the time when the computers were entering into the newsrooms. And I said, sorry, no, I don't know anything about computers. Then he leaned back, he gave me a big smile, and then he said, well, I guess you learn. And he gave me the job. So I got my 3 months. I did my internship, and now today I'm the CEO of Swedish Radio. So what did he do? Well, he saw a potential, and he helped me to actually break the glass ceiling. Because at that time, at the sports department, and in the entire country, actually, we were 3 female sports reporters. So, of course, you need someone who actually believes in you, and you have to believe in yourself. And I see that as one of my prime things that I have to do today, and that is to look for talent and look behind the CVs and help them to grow and help them to break their glass ceilings. And at the Swedish Radio right now, it's not only about diversity, gender diversity, it's also about diversity as a whole. For instance, people coming from another ethnical background. This is the management team of the Swedish Radio, and as you can see, maybe a guy or 2 too many, but I like them, they're all very good. But we work very heavily when it comes to recruitment, of course, and today we are, if you look at the entire staff of the Swedish Radio, more female than men. When we talk about gender equality, we talk about 2 things, the staff, of course, but also the content. We should not forget the content. I mean, we are responsible of who do we actually hand over the microphone to and in what kind of a context. When we look at the staff situation, we have pinpointed some areas, for instance, female managers. And in 4 years' time, we have reached a total equality, 50-50, which is good, of course. The other area where we're still struggling a bit is, of course, still in sports. It's still very male-dominated. But at least we have improved. There are twice as many female working today at the sports department than it was in 2013. So in 4 years' time, it has doubled. And what have we done then? Well, for instance, we started our own female reference project because there are right now women that are presenters and women that are doing the interviews, but we wanted them to actually be the main focus of a live broadcast. So we trained them. We picked 10 from outside of the company and trained them. And we have done this twice, and either they get a job at our place or actually they very quickly get a job with our competitors, also at the television sites and all the commercial players out there, because there are such a few. But that's also public service, to train for others. We also have a quite tough goal, I think, at the sports department, that 3 out of 5 new recruits should be female. And we have a diversity group working with the content, or actually analyzing the content, to make sure that also the female voices are actually being heard. A third area is IT and technology, at least in our company, still very male-dominated. Also there, it has doubled. It's still a very low figure, but it has doubled. One is sitting over there. And what have we done? Well, basically, once again, don't look too much at the CVs. If you pick the guy with the best CV, you will always have a guy. If you pick a female with almost as good CV, maybe a little bit a female who needs a little bit of a push, then you will get more females on board. And we have actually also had trainees programs for women coming from outside of the company. When it comes to the content, I think we have a very special responsibility because, I mean, we are out there and we have a lot of power. And if we put more females in front of the microphone, of course, there will be also more female opportunities in the society as a whole. So we have some measurable goals, and we also have listening teams. We have teams that listen to all the content that we do at all the radio stations, all the 25 locals, all the national ones for an entire week, and they go by them one by one, and they listen on a lot of different things, of course, not only if there are men and female on the show, but that's one thing that we actually measure, because in radio you can measure if there is a female voice or if there is a man voice. That's quite simple and easy to do. We also have program contracts that are very specific with measurable goals in them. We measure extensively the guests and the experts that are on air, because it's not only important that you have female voices, you also have to make sure that the female voices is not only someone who is, at the lower level of society, but there are also female experts, of course, and female stars out there, and we have a responsibility to also give them airtime. And we also pay a special interest on who is actually being heard on our current affairs programs, because that's also quite important. And we don't only focus, as I said before, on women anymore. I think we're fairly good at the Swedish radio, even though we can always improve. We look a lot on diversity as a whole, and to get more of the younger voices, both when it comes to staff and when it comes in front of the microphone and besides the microphone. Another element, if you work with radio, is of course music. 60% of our content is music at the Swedish radio. We have our own symphony orchestra, our own choir, we have our own concert hall. And also there we try to take a leading role in the Swedish society when it comes to equality. We commission music, of course. 12% right now come from female origin. It sounds very low, but it is actually quite good. We do podcast where we center on female composers. We do special programming when it comes to chamber music series about female composers. And we have our own Baltic Sea Festival. And of course, at the Baltic Sea Festival, we try to get as many female soloists as possible. And last year it was 14 women and 19 men. So not really equal, but we are getting there. But the most important thing, I think, is that you have to live by your policy. And we do have a policy. And one important part in our policy is quite simple, actually. If you have a group of people and you are going to recruit a new person, what do you not have, or what do you have less of? And if you have two people with the equal competence, of course you should choose the one that you don't have enough of. And if you follow that principle, you will quite easily get to your goal. So it's all about not if you should have gender equality, it's about how you will reach it. You clearly have to define what you mean, and not about gender, of course, because that's quite obvious, but diversity. Why do you want to have diversity in your company? And all the employees needs to be involved. This is not a one-man show. Where are the company today, and where do you want to get it to? Where do you want to go? And why is it important? Why will it be a better working environment? Why will you do better content if you have a more diverse group of people within your company? And then you have to develop a clear-cut plan with some action points and someone who's actually responsible for the action points, so that you can go there, in my case, as a CEO, and see, are the action points fulfilled? And if not, who is responsible for it? And try to win a broad buy. Try to get as many people within your company behind you as possible, not only the female. You need the men. Without them, you're not going to succeed. For me, it's very much about being inspiring and enthusiastic and really be the driving force behind it. And my simple advice to you is never give up. It's not going to be super easy. It's not going to go clear-cut in one direction. Sometimes you will take one step forward and two steps backwards, but that's also okay, because eventually you will get there, I promise you. But you have to get top management on board. if top management in your companies don't see this as important, it's not going to work. So you have to start there with top management. And in my company, I'm top management, so that makes it easy. And the goal is, of course, not have any more articles like this one. There was a big study done actually by Gothenburg University just a couple of weeks ago, where they were looking at the media market in Europe as a whole, and they saw very few female CEOs, and that was sort of written a lot about in Sweden. But in Sweden, we have 3 public service companies, since radio is separated from TV, and we also have educational radio and TV as a small company. We have 3 female CEOs. So of course then, public service in Sweden was the good example. And in the tabloid the other day, I was on one photo, and the lady who's the CEO of SVT was on another photo. And in Swedish, it said exceptions. I was exception number 1, she was exception number 2, and of course, in 2018, this should be normal and not exceptions. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks, Sila. I think that we have here 3 more ideas. Act on the recruitment, also training, and also production of contents. Okay, so our last speaker is Nikki Birch. She's the founder of the production company Rosina Sound, where she works on voice-activated content. Nikki was a founder member of the UK's Women in Audio campaign group called Sound Women, and she's going to tell us more about this initiative. So please welcome Nikki Birch.
Thank you. I haven't got any slides, I'm just going to talk. Sound Women is a kind of slight play on words in the UK, because sound also means good, your sound. It's kind of if you're from the north of England, so it's a, thank you. And it's quite a similar story to the task force, actually, the Austrian task force. We set up in 2011 a group of women working in the industry, feeling underrepresented. In fact, there was an awards ceremony where, actually a meeting about an awards ceremony, where everybody who was nominated and being discussed was men, and 2 of us, particularly the founder, Maria Williams, got really pissed off and was just thought, this is outrageous, you know, I'm going to do something about it. And really, the story of Sound Women is really her story. I'm sorry that she's not here to talk about it, but she got really galvanized, and she said, right, I'm going to bring some women together, and we're going to try and change this. This feels too like everybody is, you know, all the senior people are men, all the presenters are men. Is it just a hunch? I want to find out whether this is real or not. And so we set up Sound Women in 2011 with a mission to build the confidence, networking and leadership skills of women in radio and audio. And we wanted everybody in the industry to believe they could reach their full potential. We wanted women's voices to be heard both on air and also off air, and make the audio industry more representative. So we started by commissioning a survey, and some of the surveys were quite shocking. And I know this is 2011, but unfortunately I haven't got a survey today to tell you, the results of where it's got, but I can assure you that things have changed slightly. The survey we did looked at women's role in the industry, and the representation of women at the time was highest in HR, secretarial, admin, legal, distribution, sales and marketing, I think was 64%, production was 53%, editing, engineering and transmission was 9%, studio operations was 10%. And so you could see the sort of balance of positions. And it also showed an interesting profile of radio workforce by grade. There was a clear fall in representation of women as they travelled up the hierarchy. 42% of managers were female, 34% of senior managers, and 17% of those operating at board level. So it's probably similar to the situation that we're talking about in Sweden and Austria. And also there was just a kind of toxic environment, particularly about on-air talent. The flagship news show in the BBC in the UK is the Today programme. It's on Radio 4. And the editor in 2010 was a man called Kerry Thomas, who actually was quoted on air saying it was too hard for women to present that programme. He said that most female journalists did not have a thick enough skin to deal with the programme's incredibly difficult environment, which is, an outrageous thing to say only sort of 8 years ago. And we kicked up a big fuss, and there had been a female presenter, but she had left at the time, and since then they're a very fantastic, a number of female presenters, but Michelle Hussain was hired, and I think in this International Women's Day, the Today programme was presented all by women, now, and so and I think so we've seen some changes in the period of time that it was operating in, but continue to see a series of changes. Going back to kind of voices, in 2013 we commissioned another survey about on-air talent, and this was looking about sort of where women were on air compared to men. I think this was interesting, particularly in the BBC, but 1 in 5 solo voices at that time were female. That figure was 1 in 8 during peak time, so that's drive time and breakfast. In co-hosted shows, you were nearly 10 times as likely to hear 2 male presenters as you were to hear 2 female presenters. It just didn't happen that you heard 2 female presenters together on air back then. And now, fantastically, 5 Live, which is a news show on BBC, in the morning quite often you'll hear 2 women presenters, and with a female sports presenter as well. And it shouldn't be weird, but it actually still sounds unusual, But that's a fantastic kind of change. And fantastically as well that Tony Hall, who's the Director General of the BBC, has pledged to have 50% of presenters or co-presenters to be women. It's changing, but it's happening kind of more, slower than we want. But we did sort of more than kick up a fuss. We actively encouraged and supported women as they networked, as they worked their way towards new jobs. So just like you did in Austria, the task force, we hosted events. So we had mentoring schemes. So the mentoring scheme was really, really successful, and we did it for a number of years. Many women have got kind of promotions and increased their contacts and positions. I'm just going to read you a quote for somebody who's come out of the mentoring scheme. At the beginning of this scheme, my confidence was low. I'd been given the opportunity to present a show and had been heavily criticised. Being chosen for this scheme was a huge boost to my completely shattered confidence. As a consequence of Sound Women, my confidence has continued to grow. One of the first meetings really struck a chord with advice of how to take criticism. This is just one of the many pieces of advice I've benefited from. It was also helpful to meet other female presenters and discuss challenges faced, which are often similar to my own. My mentor is truly inspirational. I was surprised that someone of her caliber would help me. However, she has been so generous with her time and support. And thanks to her, I feel as a direct consequence to Sound Women and her that I'm a better presenter to the one I was this time last year. I've explored my attitude and my ambitions. I have self-belief and a professional heavyweight behind me for support. I've also learned how to deal with the challenges in a professional, realistic and positive way. And that's one of a number of kind of really positive experiences that both mentors and mentees got out of the program that we ran. And I think, it really galvanized young, not just young women as well. It was, people in all positions to kind of reach out and go, actually, we need to support each other and really help each other if we want to change things in terms of change the senior management makeup, change the profile of women off and on air. So it was kind of through these sorts of things. So the mentoring scheme, we ran training days, we ran networking days, meetups. And what's really lovely is people in the room here that I can see that I've met through Sound Women, and I still have that urge to go up to them and say, hello, and isn't it fantastic we know each other. Sadly, in 2016, we decided we ran out of money. And it was an energy, and Maria, particularly, who was running the organisation, just felt she couldn't give it anymore. And I think this is something which is really. You talked about the funding. We couldn't get the funding from commercial radio and the BBC and people like that to carry on. So we became a digital-only organisation in 2016. And actually what's happened then has been, it's a sort of sad story, but it's also been quite positive, because actually the membership, the organisation, people who were members have really sort of taken over, and it was led by a group of senior women who were sort of driving it and doing all the volunteering and taking up their own time. But now what's happened is the people who didn't really want it to finish, and so we've set up a Facebook page, and there's 1,500 women on the Facebook page, and now they're organising meetups and sharing jobs and sharing advice and support, and there's a kind of weekly technical tips video that goes up, and there's it's sort of running. The momentum is carrying on, where perhaps the organisation, when the official organisation has shut down, and lots of the regional groups that we set up, they also still continue to meet up. So So on the one hand, it's kind of it's a shame that the organisation kind of itself has closed, but the kind of the message has carried on, and we've seen in the last 6 months, particularly in Britain, that there's been a big focus on equal pay for women, as the government has enforced every organisation with over 250 employers to basically publish their gender pay gap. That has seen, quite a huge ramifications for the BBC and now more recently Channel 4 and ITN. These are all broadcasters in the UK. And so the sort of message and the spirit of the work that we've done has kind of lived on, and particularly there's a huge fuss being generated by women within these organisations and saying, hold on a sec, we're not getting paid as much, and not just the presenters, but also throughout the organisation. So I feel buoyed by the spirit of everything we've achieved, and really pleased that kind of the legacy carries on.
Okay, so thank you. We have time for the debate. We have time for sharing your ideas. If you know any initiative, if you have any question, it's time for that. No? Questions there? Yeah. We have a microphone, so please.
This is a question for Celia. I'm so inspired by you because you're a public media CEO who doesn't just talk about diversity, you walk the walk. That's really remarkable. And I guess I want to know, have you always been this way, or have you had conversations where people convince you of something that you didn't know and sort of expand your ideas of what you should fight for? Because when we talk to CEOs, sometimes we feel like they're not listening to us. So what advice do you have?
Well, first, of course, it helps, I guess, that I'm a female myself, so I see sort of no problem in this. But I also come from an immigrant background. My parents were refugees coming into Sweden, so I've always been in an environment where I was sort of underrepresented in a sense. I started, as you heard, in the sports department. I mean, we were 3 females in the entire country, and I don't know how many hundreds of men. So in a way, I guess that's part of my personality. But also, I think if you grow up in an environment where you are brought up with a sense of that it's here and now that actually counts, because if you come from an immigrant background, what you get from your parents is that it's no point looking back, because you're not going to go back. And it's no point really looking so much forward either, because you're full of, you have to put all your energy in where you are. Then that sort of is also part of me. And therefore I think, well, if this needs to be done, it needs to be done now. I mean, and if it hasn't worked before, okay. Do we want it to work in the future? Yes, but we can't wait. And that's also what you said. I mean, there's no point sitting around waiting. And now I have the power. So in that sense, I mean, I can do what I want, basically. And for me, this is important. And as I said, not only gender equality, I think diversity as a whole is so important, because the content becomes so much better, and our company becomes so much more relevant. I mean, we have 2 million people in Sweden now with another background than 100% Swedish. We want them to pay the license fee. We want to be there for them. We want to be part of their daily life. Of course, then that also has to reflect who we have as staff and who we give the microphone to, and who we put on air. So, I mean, that's just the way I see it.
Hi there. I was thinking about, you're talking about the mentor program, and you're always talking, the 3 of you were talking about the women to women. I was wondering, a man to a woman in a mentor program? Are we not there yet? Is that the next step? Or why are we always talking about, oh, who was your mentor? Was it a woman? Why can we only guide each other, women to women, in this battle?
Well, I actually always had both. Most of my coaches or mentors have been men, because I felt I know how it is to be a woman, so I don't need to learn that. But sometimes it's also good to have a female coach that's maybe 10 years older than you, So now I also have that, someone who's gone through the phases that you are going through and actually out of their own experience could give you some guidance, which a male coach can't because he hasn't been there. And even in Sweden, which is a quite equal country, I mean, there's still a lot to do. We still haven't had a prime minister who is female in Sweden. We had the biggest Me Too discussion of all countries, I think, before Christmas. So, I mean, I think if you have a possibility to have two, that's my advice.
I would. Hi. I'm not sure if this is on. I'm just going to talk. Okay, so I think there is something beneficial about having a woman-to-woman mentoring, because I think a lot of the reasons, and this is a huge generalization, but a lot of the reasons why women are struggling to perhaps go for positions is the lack of confidence. And there's a lot of women who, you know, that classic thing of they don't apply for jobs unless they're 95% sure they have all the, you know, the qualifications. And I think there's a lot of things that you recognize in younger women or older women recognize in you that they've been through, and whether that's caring responsibilities, lack of confidence, you know, feeling like you're not able to talk and share things with your colleagues, or, you know, it's a very generalization. It doesn't apply to all women, but the amount of women I've mentored who have very similar kind of career crises moments, you know, a lack of confidence in their own abilities, and I recognize that in myself, and I'm not sure that the same could be said for men. And I think if you can have both, it's amazing, but it works very, very well for women to mentor other women. And I think it's a positive thing as a mentee, and as a mentor, if you're mentoring someone else and you're looking, okay, I can support you, that also gives you confidence in your abilities as well. So in wherever you are in the position, in the kind of hierarchy or position of seniority, we all have crises of confidence in our work, and sometimes it's very reassuring to say, oh, I can help you, and at the same time, I do know what I'm talking about, I do have the experience, and that also helps me. So I think it is very beneficial.
We sort of thought a lot about this. In the beginning, we said we want women to encourage other women because they understand the problems better, they have had the same problems when they were younger, etc., etc. We have not changed our attitude in the meantime. We insist on women being mentors for female mentees because we think that women are different than men, and we don't want to make the women better men. Like if you had a male mentor in Austria, he would try to push you into the direction you act like a man, you don't react like a woman and whatever. And we said, we don't want that. We want society and our company to accept that we are women, acting as women, deciding like women, and that's a good thing. It's not to be changed.
But I also think it's important to realize that there are women and women. I mean, and that there are men and men.
Yes.
And I'm trying to say to at least people at the Swedish radio, look at your own personality. What are your good sides? What are your bad sides? What are your weak spots? What are your really good spots? And learn yourself. I mean, you have to know who you are to be able to actually grow. With or without help. I'm a little bit allergic because sometimes I'm sort of on a debate and I have to explain what is female leadership. And for me that's very difficult to say because my leadership style is most likely maybe not the same as another female leader, and I know for sure in Sweden that's the case. So for me it's more about personality and diversity and see who do you have, who do you don't have. If I create a management team, what kind of personalities do I have a lot of, what do I not have a lot of? And not only when it comes to gender, because there are some men that lack confidence and there are some female with very much confidence, even sometimes too much. But to be honest, I mean, people perceive me to be a person with a lot of self-confidence, which is not true. I started with very low self-esteem. And you can build it up, and you just have to realize that there are opportunities, and if you get an opportunity, it's only you who can decide if you want to grab it or not. And sometimes, and that's true more when it comes to female than men, we don't. We underestimate our possibility to achieve something, and we want to overperform. We want to achieve by 150%, and if we don't think we can, then we say no, thank you. And men don't do that. If they think that they can achieve by 80%, they say yes. And that is a difference. So, I mean, but yeah, you have to really know who you are and start with that.
Hello. The question is to Mrs. Wustenhagen. Sorry about your name. If I pronounce it well. How do you motivate men in particular to pay attention to diversity and in particular to women diversity?
Well, it's quite a difficult thing, as a matter of fact. We found out in the beginning we had a lot of pressure against us because, of course, men don't step down from power out of their free will. Why should they? I wouldn't if I had all the possibilities they had in our company. But as a matter of fact, the attitude has changed in these last. In the first thing that nowadays sometimes they say, okay, I will never be in a leading position because I'm not a woman, so I've got no chances, whatever. It's just a bit of going back and forth. But I think they are starting to get convinced, and like Sila said, it's a question of the top management. We have our Director General who is committed to this issue now, and he works as an example for the rest of the management as well, and of executives being men. But if you don't have the top management, you're lost. You have so much pressure against you, you don't know how to, you can't do it.
Okay, so we don't have much time, but anyway, I think that this chain of attitude has started, especially with the movement Me Too. But of course, we still have a long way. And I would like to finish with this image. Let me show you this image. This image travel around the world. In fact, this is an image from BBC News. These are all the women in Spain just 10 days ago saying, without us, war is stopped. So I think that this is a good slogan to finish. Thank you very much for attending, and thank you, our speakers. Warm applause for them, please. Thank you very much.